The autumn wind swept through the gardens of Kensington Palace as Kate Middleton walked slowly along the stone pathway. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the envelope that had arrived that morning. The royal seal was broken, but the contents inside had shattered something far more precious than wax. Prince William was in his study, reviewing documents for his upcoming charity gala. The morning had started like any other, with breakfast in the sunny kitchen overlooking the gardens. Kate had been quiet, but he assumed she was simply tired from their recent public appearances. Their life had become a careful dance of royal duties and private moments stolen between official engagements. The sound of footsteps on marble floors echoed through the palace corridors. Camilla, the queen consort, had arrived for what was supposed to be a routine meeting about upcoming state functions. Her presence always commanded attention, and today was no different. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had weathered many storms and emerged victorious. Kate found herself standing outside the drawing room where she could hear Camilla's voice. Something in the tone made her pause. Through the slightly open door, she witnessed a phone conversation that would change everything she thought she knew about her family. "The documents are secure," Camilla was saying into her private phone. 20 years of careful planning, and they still have no idea. The inheritance was never meant for William's line anyway. Charles agreed to this long before he met that woman. Kate's breath caught in her throat. The envelope in her hands suddenly felt heavy as lead. Inside were photographs and documents that a palace insider had risked everything to share with her, bank statements showing money transferred to offshore accounts, legal documents with forged signatures, most shocking of all, a will that had been altered after King Charles's father had passed away. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The crown jewels, the estates, the very foundation of William's inheritance, none of it was legitimate. For years, Camilla had been systematically redirecting the royal wealth, ensuring that when the time came, her own children from her first marriage would benefit instead of William and his heirs. Camilla ended her call and turned toward the door. Kate quickly stepped back, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it could be heard throughout the palace. She needed to find William immediately, but first she had to understand the full scope of what she had discovered. Back in her private chambers, Kate spread the documents across her desk. Each page revealed another layer of deception. Property deeds had been quietly transferred. Investment accounts had been emptied and refilled with different beneficiaries. Even the famous jewelry collection that was meant to pass to future queens had been slowly sold and replaced with expertly crafted replicas. The most devastating discovery was a recorded conversation between Camilla and her financial advisor. Kate's hands shook as she pressed play on the small recording device that had been hidden in the envelope. Camilla's voice was clear and calculating as she discussed the final phase of her plan. "Once Charles is gone, they'll discover the debts," Camilla's recorded voice explained. "By then, most of the real assets will be safely transferred. William will inherit a title and nothing more. My children will have what should have been theirs all along." Kate felt sick to her stomach. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about the future of the monarchy itself. If William inherited massive debts instead of the royal fortune, the very institution they had dedicated their lives to serving would crumble. Their children's future, the stability of the Commonwealth, everything would be at risk. She thought about the sacrifices they had made, the privacy they had given up, the normal life they could never have, the constant scrutiny from the media. All of it had been based on the understanding that they were serving something greater than themselves. Now she realized they had been pawns in someone else's game. The afternoon sun was setting as Kate finally gathered the courage to call William. He was in meetings all day, but she sent a message asking him to come home immediately. The urgency in her tone must have been clear because he responded within minutes, saying he was leaving right away. As she waited for William to return, Kate paced the length of their private sitting room. How do you tell the man you love that his entire inheritance has been stolen? How do you explain that the woman his father married has been systematically destroying his family's legacy for decades? The sound of William's car in the driveway made her heart race. Soon she would have to share this devastating truth. The documents were arranged on the coffee table, each one representing another betrayal, another lie that had been carefully maintained for years. William's key turned in the door, and Kate heard his familiar voice calling out her name. In a few moments, their world would never be the same again. The truth she had discovered would shatter not just their personal lives, but potentially the very foundation of the British monarchy. She took a deep breath and prepared to tell her husband that everything he had believed about his heritage, his future, and his stepmother had been an elaborate deception designed to rob him of his birthright. William entered their home with his usual warm smile, but it faded quickly when he saw Kate's pale face. She was standing in the center of their sitting room, surrounded by papers spread across every surface. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the documents, making the scene look like the aftermath of some terrible storm. "Kate? What's happened?" William asked, immediately moving toward her. He had seen her upset before, but never like this. There was something in her eyes that looked like fear mixed with determination. Kate's voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. "Sit down, William. Please. What I'm about to tell you will change everything." William settled into his favorite armchair, the one that had belonged to his grandmother. Kate noticed the irony. Even this piece of furniture might not truly belong to their family anymore. She picked up the first document, her hands still trembling. "This morning, someone left an envelope for me," Kate began, her voice growing stronger. "Someone who works inside the palace, someone who couldn't stay silent anymore about what they've witnessed." She handed William the bank statements first. His eyes scanned the numbers, the dates, the account transfers. At first, confusion crossed his face. These weren't accounts he recognized, but the amounts were staggering. Millions of pounds moving between different institutions, all bearing official palace seals. "I don't understand," William said, looking up at Kate. "What are these?" Kate knelt beside his chair and pointed to specific entries. "Look at the dates, William. Every major transfer happens right after a significant royal event. When your grandmother passed away, when property was inherited, when investments matured. The money comes in legitimately, but then it disappears into these private accounts." William's jaw tightened as he began to understand what he was seeing. "Whose accounts are these?" Kate's voice dropped to a whisper again. "Camilla's, and her children's. Money that should have gone to preserve the Crown estate has been systematically transferred to her family for over 20 years. The color drained from William's face. He set down the bank statements and reached for the next set of documents. These were legal papers, wills, property deeds, investment portfolios. Each one told the same story of wealth being quietly redirected away from the traditional royal inheritance. "There's more," Kate said softly. She showed him the photographs next. Images of jewelry pieces that were supposed to be in the royal collection, but were actually being worn by Camilla's daughter at private events. Pictures of estate properties that had been quietly sold, with the proceeds disappearing into the same network of private accounts. William stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the gardens where he had played as a child. Those gardens, he now realized, might not belong to his family much longer. Everything he had been raised to believe about his legacy was crumbling before his eyes. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Kate joined him at the window. "According to these documents, it started shortly after Camilla married your father. Small amounts at first, things that wouldn't be noticed immediately. But as she gained more influence, as your father grew older and less involved in day-to-day management, the transfers became larger and more frequent." William thought about all the times Camilla had offered to help with financial matters, all the occasions when she had taken on more responsibility for managing royal assets. He had been grateful for her assistance, thinking it showed how much she cared about the family. Now he realized it had given her access to everything she needed to orchestrate this massive theft. "The recording is the worst part," Kate said quietly, handing him the small device. "Listen to this." William pressed play, and Camilla's voice filled their sitting room. Her tone was casual, businesslike, as she discussed the final phase of her plan with someone she clearly trusted completely. Every word was like a knife through William's heart. "The monarchy needs modernizing anyway," Camilla's recorded voice continued. "When Charles is gone, the institution will face a financial crisis. That's when we'll suggest selling off more properties, streamlining operations. By the time anyone realizes the extent of the missing assets, it will be too late to recover them." William's hands were shaking as he set down the device. The woman who had sat at family dinners, who had played with his children, who had stood beside his father during the most important moments of his reign. She had been planning their destruction all along. "She's been waiting for my father to die," William said, the reality of the situation finally hitting him fully. "All these years, she's been positioning herself to leave us with nothing but debts and empty titles." Kate nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "The person who gave me these documents said there's more. Properties in other countries, investments in companies that your family doesn't even know about. She's built an entire financial empire using royal assets, and none of it will ever return to the crown." William sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the betrayal. This wasn't just about money, though the financial implications were staggering. This was about the future of an institution that had served Britain for over 1,000 years. If Camilla's plan succeeded, the monarchy would become nothing more than a ceremonial shell, surviving on government allowances and tourist revenue. "What about Harry?" William asked suddenly. "Does he know about any of this?" Kate shook her head. "According to the documents, Harry's inheritance is already gone. Those trust funds that were set up for him when he was young, they've been emptied and replaced with debts. When he stepped back from royal duties, it actually helped cover the missing money because no one expected him to have access to those accounts anymore." William thought about his brother, living in California, probably completely unaware that his safety net had been stolen. Despite their recent differences, the thought of Harry being deceived like this made William's anger burn even hotter. The sun had set completely now, and their sitting room was lit only by the warm glow of table lamps. The documents looked even more ominous in the dim light, like evidence of some terrible crime spread across their coffee table. "We have to confront her," William said finally. "Tonight, before she has a chance to move any more assets or destroy evidence." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She had been hoping they could take time to plan, maybe involve lawyers or financial experts first. But she knew William was right. Every day they waited was another day for Camilla to cover her tracks or accelerate her timeline. "She's at Clarence House tonight," Kate said. "I saw her calendar when I was gathering information. She's supposed to be hosting a private dinner for some charity board members." William looked at his wife with newfound respect. In a single day, she had uncovered a conspiracy that had been 20 years in the making. Her courage and determination had potentially saved not just their family, but the entire institution they had devoted their lives to serving. "Then we go to Clarence House," William said, his voice filled with grim determination. "It's time for Camilla to explain herself." As they prepared to leave, Kate carefully gathered all the documents. Each piece of evidence represented years of careful deception, but also their only hope of setting things right. The confrontation ahead would be unlike anything either of them had ever faced, but they knew they had no choice but to see it through. The drive to Clarence House felt like the longest journey of their lives. William gripped the steering wheel tightly while Kate sat beside him, the envelope of evidence clutched in her lap. Neither of them spoke during the 20-minute trip through London's evening traffic. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air between them. Clarence House stood majestically under the glow of its exterior lighting. Through the tall windows, they could see the warm light from the dining room where Camilla was entertaining her guests. The scene looked perfectly normal, elegant even. It was hard to believe that behind those walls lived someone who had orchestrated the systematic destruction of their family's legacy. William parked in the private courtyard and turned off the engine. For a moment, they both sat in silence, gathering their courage for what lay ahead. Kate reached over and squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens in there, we face it together," she whispered. William nodded, though his face was pale with tension. "I still can't quite believe it's real. 20 years of lies. How did we never suspect?" They walked to the main entrance, where the butler recognized them immediately and opened the door with a surprised smile. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the dining room, a sharp contrast to the dark purpose of their visit. "Your Royal Highness, we weren't expecting you," the butler said. "Her Majesty is currently with guests for dinner." "We need to speak with her urgently," William replied, his voice carrying an authority that made the butler step back immediately. "Please ask her to join us in the blue drawing room." The butler hurried away, and William and Kate made their way to the elegant room where so many important family conversations had taken place over the years. Kate arranged the most damaging documents on the coffee table while William paced by the fireplace, trying to control his emotions. Minutes later, they heard Camilla's voice in the hallway as she made excuses to her guests about a brief interruption. When she entered the drawing room, she was smiling warmly, still dressed in her elegant dinner attire. "William, Kate." "What a lovely surprise," Camilla said, moving toward them with open arms. "Though I'm afraid the timing is rather awkward with guests here. Can this wait until tomorrow?" "No," William said firmly, not moving to embrace her as he normally would. "It cannot wait." Camilla's smile faltered slightly as she noticed the tension in the room and the documents spread across the table. Her eyes quickly scanned the papers, and Kate saw a flicker of recognition cross her face before she composed herself again. "What's all this, then?" Camilla asked, her tone carefully controlled. Kate spoke first, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "These are bank records, Camilla. Transfer documents, evidence of 20 years of systematic theft from the Crown estate." The color drained from Camilla's face, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about. If there are financial irregularities, perhaps we should involve the proper authorities." William stepped forward, his voice growing stronger with each word. "The authorities? You mean the same officials you've been paying off to falsify documents? The same lawyers who helped you forge my grandfather's will?" Camilla's mask finally slipped. The warm, motherly expression she had worn for so many years disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. She moved to the sofa and sat down gracefully, as if she were settling in for a negotiation rather than a confrontation. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Camilla said, but her voice had changed. The pretense of shock and innocence was gone. "The monarchy was drowning in archaic financial structures and poor investments. I simply modernized the approach." Kate felt a chill at how easily Camilla had shifted from denial to justification. "Modernized? You stole millions of pounds and transferred them to your own children. You've been planning to bankrupt the Crown for decades." Camilla laughed then, and the sound was exactly as Kate had heard it described in the title that had brought them to this moment, cold and without warmth. It was a laugh that held no humor, only triumph and disdain. "Bankrupt?" Camilla repeated, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, my dear Kate, you understand so little about how the world really works. The monarchy needs to evolve or die. Charles was too sentimental, too attached to old ways of doing things. I simply ensured that when the time came, more practical minds would be in control of the family's assets. William stared at his stepmother in shock. This was not the woman who had comforted him after his mother's death, who had stood by his father through difficult times, who had played grandmother to his children. This was someone completely different, someone who had been wearing a mask for over 20 years. "You've been planning this since you married my father," William said, the full scope of the betrayal finally hitting him. Every kindness, every moment of support, it was all calculated to gain access to our family's wealth. Camilla stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens she would soon own if her plan succeeded. "Your father was easy to manipulate once I understood what he needed. Comfort, validation, someone to tell him he was doing the right thing. He signed whatever I put in front of him without reading the details." Kate felt sick hearing how casually Camilla spoke about deceiving King Charles. "He loves you. He trusted you completely." "Love is a useful tool," Camilla replied without turning around, "but it doesn't pay for maintaining properties or funding the lifestyle this family expects. Charles inherited an empire that was already struggling financially. I simply redirected the resources to people who would use them more effectively." William felt the room spinning around him. The magnitude of the deception was overwhelming. Not only had Camilla stolen their inheritance, but she had manipulated his grieving father into helping her do it. Every signature Charles had given, every financial decision he had trusted her with, had been part of her plan to destroy the family from within. "The jewelry," Kate said, her voice barely audible. "You've been selling off pieces of the crown collection and replacing them with copies." Camilla finally turned back to face them, and her expression was almost proud. "Do you have any idea how much those dusty old pieces were worth? Sitting in vaults, seen by no one, generating no income. I put them to better use and ensured the family still had the appearance of wealth for public events." William suddenly understood why he had felt something was wrong during recent state occasions. The weight of the crown felt different. The sparkle of certain jewels seemed dimmed. He had attributed it to his imagination, but his instincts had been correct. "You've destroyed everything," William whispered, and for a moment, Kate thought he might collapse from the shock of it all. 1,000 years of heritage gone. But Camilla wasn't finished. The cold laugh came again, and this time it was accompanied by a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Oh, William, you still don't understand the scope of what I've accomplished," she said, moving back toward the sofa. "The properties, the investments, the jewelry, that was just the beginning. Tomorrow morning, your father will sign the final documents transferring the remaining crown assets to a new trust, a trust that I control, ostensibly for the modernization of the monarchy." Kate grabbed William's arm as she saw him sway slightly. The shock of learning that their nightmare was far from over, that there was still more damage to be done, was almost too much to bear. "You can't," William said, his voice breaking. "My father would never agree to that." Camilla's smile grew wider, and in that moment, Kate finally understood the true depth of her cruelty. "Your father is dying, William. The doctors gave him 6 months, possibly less. He's desperate to secure the future of the monarchy before he's gone. When I present him with a plan that appears to safeguard everything he's worked for, he'll sign without hesitation." The room fell into complete silence. William stared at Camilla in horror, not just at her confession, but at the casual way she had revealed his father's terminal diagnosis. Kate felt tears streaming down her face as the full picture became clear. William's legs gave out, and he collapsed into the nearest chair, overwhelmed by the combination of grief, shock, and rage. His father was dying, and his stepmother had turned even that tragedy into an opportunity for her final theft. Everything he had believed about his family, his future, and the woman who had raised him had been a lie. Camilla stood over him, no longer bothering to hide her true nature. 20 years of deception had led to this moment, and she had finally revealed herself completely. The Crown, the Commonwealth, the institution that had defined British identity for centuries. She was prepared to destroy it all for personal gain. Kate knelt beside William's chair, knowing that in the morning they would have to find a way to stop Camilla's final move. But tonight, they could only sit in shock at the magnitude of the betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight for so many years.